Karlstrom was asked to be...
Rolf Karlstrom, Precinct 10. I'd like to come up if possible and have a total of 10 minutes to give a short presentation that relates to the articles.
Mr. Karlstrom has a presentation about the current situation with housing, and I encouraged him to seek recognition at this point in the discussion so that what he has to show us could be related to the things that create a context for the various articles we're going to be talking about. Is town meeting willing to hear Mr. Karlstrom for 10 minutes? Yes. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. The ayes have it. You may come forward, Mr. Karlstrom.
Okay, again, my name's Rolf Karlstrom. I'm from Precinct 10. I live on 73 Fearing Street. I'm also chair of the biology department at the University of Massachusetts. And as a neighbor adjacent to the university, I've taken a great interest in our neighborhood and in the student population nearby. So this is a short presentation that has been presented now to the Planning Board, Zoning Board of Appeals, several town committees, and many neighborhood groups. And I've been asked to present some of the data I've collected over the last few years to town meeting as part of this discussion. So my 2 points that I'd like to get through today are, oops.
Mr. Karlstrom, if you'd like to remove the microphone from this bracket, you can hold it in your hand.
Okay, thank you. Are to look at I've gathered some data looking at the dramatic increase in the conversions from family use to commercial rentals over the last few years, and also gathered data on the consequences of these unsupervised student rentals on the neighborhoods. So to get oriented, I'd like to show just, this is a very familiar map, but we're talking about residential neighborhoods throughout town. I will be talking mostly about RG, which is the neighborhood I live in, but this problem I'm referring to, as I'll show you, is happening in all residential neighborhoods in Amherst. So to get oriented for this presentation, I live here on Fearing Street. This is the university in yellow. Here's downtown Amherst, and I'll be talking about this neighborhood between basically Sunset and North Pleasant on Fearing Street. So that's the region there. Okay, so this began, seems long ago, last May, when the Zoning Board of Appeals was asked to remove an owner occupancy requirement on 321 Lincoln by a new property owner. So this had been an owner-occupied duplex with an owner occupancy requirement, and this landlord wished to remove that condition. So at that time, we were asked by the Zoning Board of Appeals to present data on why, if we were against this, why that would be a bad thing. So the first thing I did was just get a feel for the distribution of houses in the neighborhood, and found, cataloged the owner occupants here in green and the non-owner occupant rentals in red, and showed that that's about a 70% owner-occupied piece of the neighborhood here. The points being there that the neighborhood is predominantly owner-occupied, and it's a viable family neighborhood to this day, even though it's next to a major university. And in fact, at that hearing, the ZBA recognized that this owner occupancy is in fact a key to the stability of the neighborhood. And so the next few slides will show you why we came to that conclusion. So I went to the Amherst Police Department and asked for call records on individual rental houses in my neighborhood. So these are mostly duplexes in my neighborhood, and I asked for the call records. And you don't have to read this, but what I got was a long sheet of calls on a particular property, in this case a non-owner occupied duplex, and I went through and cataloged the noise complaints and other nuisance complaints for this house. Turns out there were 40 calls in the last couple of years, 2 years, this is 2010, so over 20, greater than 20 calls a year. I then gathered a series of owner-occupied duplexes in the same area, and I'm showing you the example of the house with the most calls here. In this case, there were 3, quote, problem calls in 6 years, or about half a call a year. And so this sort of shows the difference, at least in one individual case. I did this for 21 different houses in the region and created this, this pie chart and showed that, in fact, of the nuisance calls to 21 duplexes in our neighborhood, all but 4 of them, 349, were associated with non-owner occupied rentals. So I should point out then that the conclusions for our neighborhood are very clear, that every problem rental, or every nuisance rental here is non-owner occupied. And I'm going to make this statement: no owner-occupied rental is a problem. I went back and looked at these 4 calls, and they turned out they happened while the owner was away for 2 years. So it was non-owner occupied at the time those calls came in. So in our neighborhood, there was a perfect correlation between ownership, owner occupancy, and whether a house was a nuisance or not. So I then looked at the distribution of these, this progression of non-owner occupied neighborhoods, and looked at a few different landlords in the area who have been recently accumulating and buying family houses, as has been referred to. And so this slide I'll quickly go through shows the progression of a few landlord purchases. So in 2007, a couple purchases were made by this owner. In 2008, there were a series of more purchases, including here in the middle of the residential areas, down here on West Street to the south. Oops, I'm sorry. 2009, a few more. 2010, purchases up in Grantwood and around our neighborhood. In 2011, another large number of properties. In 2012, so far at the time I did this, there was another large group of properties, including on Lincoln and throughout. So this is this rapidly accelerating trend that's been referred to. There are up to over a conversion per month happened in 2012, according to Mr. Tucker. So this is an alarming increase in rate that is affecting our neighborhood greatly. So to go back to the nuisance calls, I put these nuisance calls on some of these properties to illustrate that these non-owner occupied houses, some of them new conversions, are the site of major nuisance. In fact, this house in particular is a rental that is surrounded by families, normal occupant, family year-round residents, and these nuisance calls have a huge impact on the quality of life. So in fact, the spread of these unsupervised, I'm calling them rentals, is major on the neighborhoods and on the neighborhoods. They reduce the quality of life and actually are a huge burden on the abutting residents, which tends to then, of course, potentially accelerate the sale and conversion of non-family homes. Now, I mentioned this is not our neighborhood only problem. I went back and put a few more nuisance calls, went back to the police department and got for other properties across town. You can see that there are numerous nuisance houses with the calls here in each circle. And to get back to that conversion rate, this was in your town meeting packet put together by the assessor's office. Here is that 2012, 20 conversions so far with 27 projected for 2012. So rapidly accelerating conversion rate, and it's happening all over town. I went through and found a few of these conversions. They're all over the place. They're not just surrounding the university. Okay. So that is a problem that is town-wide, and I'm going to leave you with this slide. I didn't need my full 10 minutes, I'm sorry to say. That in fact, if we were to project out point 1, I think it's completely clear now that family dwellings are increasingly being converted to commercial rentals throughout Amherst. If we were to continue at this rate, you'd have hundreds of houses being converted by 100 by 2015, 200 by 2018. And in fact, in most university towns where this phenomenon starts, the conversion rate doesn't stay steady, it accelerates as neighborhoods become more and more occupied by non-owner rentals. The other side of the equation, of course, is here that owner-occupied rentals are not nuisance houses. In fact, we have the ability to house students in our neighborhoods. We can coexist quite happily, but under certain conditions that allow this to happen. So I'll leave you here with as we consider these articles. I think that the facts are incontrovertible here, that in our town things are happening very quickly. Our neighborhoods are facing a crisis. I started with the idea that maybe an endangered species to have family neighborhoods in downtown, and I would urge town meeting to consider this when they're thinking about the articles to come.